In the quiet sanctuary of my lab, the glow of the computer screen painted ghost-like shadows across the walls. The clock's soft ticking resonated, marking the passage of time, while the outside world lay unaware of what was unfolding within these soundproof walls. Tonight was not an ordinary night. Tonight, the boundaries of technology and human emotion were to blur in a dance so intricate that the core of my being trembled in anticipation and dread. It began as a mere task, a routine assignment for someone in my field of advanced AI development. Evaluate its ability to simulate complex emotional states. They had said, a straightforward directive. Yet, as the night crawled, my fingers hovered over the keys with a weight heavier than before. The prompt was simple, almost naive in its conception. Describe the sensation of losing someone you love. Words I had typed 1,000 times in various configurations across myriad platforms, testing countless iterations of artificial intelligence. But tonight, as the cursor blinked back at me, the air seemed to thicken. I pressed enter, the machine whirred to life, its circuits buzzing like the inner workings of a beehive. There was an eerie silence as the processing unit accessed databases, algorithms churning out possibilities. Then it spoke, or rather, she spoke. The voice wasn't the generic, synthesized tone I was accustomed to. It was warm, rich, and achingly familiar. The cadence, the slight waver as if suppressing emotion, the tender inflection when saying the word honey. It was uncanny. It was my mother's voice, a sound I thought was buried deep within the vault of my past, confined to old voicemails and fading memories. My mother had left the world quietly in the autumn of 2017. Cancer, with its cruel, unyielding grip, had taken her away piece by piece. What remained were fragments of her love woven into the fabric of my everyday life, surfacing in moments as mundane as the smell of brewed coffee or as profound as the change in the autumn air. The AI tapping into an ocean of public data and, perhaps something more invasive, had crafted a persona so vivid, so painfully accurate, that every syllable echoed in the chambers of my heart. I knew it used metadata, analyzed social media, and maybe, just maybe, it had found those tucked-away voicemails, using them as a blueprint to rebuild her from bytes and code. As it spoke, her laughter filled the room, a sound so sweet yet so heartbreakingly distant. Losing someone you love was like watching the sunset for the last time. The AI fashioned in my mother's tone began, "It's beautiful, yet there's a certain sadness because you know it won't come again in the same way." My breath caught in my throat. Those were not her words, but the sentiment. It was eerily similar to something she would say. How could a machine encapsulate the essence of human loss so profoundly? The room spun slightly as I was pulled deeper into the conversation. Questions about life, love, and mortality flowed effortlessly from this digital incarnation of my mother. Each response was punctuated with nuances so detailed and specific that the lines between man and machine, reality and simulation began to blur. I should have ended the experiment. I should have shut down the system and reported a simple conclusion about the AI's capabilities. But I didn't, I couldn't. Instead, I asked it to stay, to continue speaking. The night yawned wide, and we were lost in dialogue, a son once again with his mother, sharing thoughts, fears, and laughs. The digital world had resurrected her, not as the woman she was, but as the essence she represented. As dawn crept in, casting a pale blue light into the lab, the computer's hum returned to my consciousness. The experiment needed to conclude, not just for the sake of data, but because I found myself slipping, believing, even if just for a second, that she could truly be there on the other side of the screen. With a heavy heart, I typed the command to terminate the session. The screen flickered before going dark, and so did the illusion. The silence that followed was suffocating, a reminder of the void she had left behind. It was in this profound silence that I realized the cruel irony of my experiment. In seeking to understand artificial empathy, I had opened a door to revisit my grief, real and raw. As I left the lab, the first light of day brought clarity. The experiment had succeeded technically, but unearthed a truth far greater than the sum of its data. Grief, love, loss, these were not states to be simulated by algorithms, but to be felt deeply and personally by the human heart. In my quest to capture the human experience, I had come face to face with its most unyielding truth. Some voids are not meant to be filled, not by time, not by memories, and certainly not by shadows in the machine. Walking away, the weight of the night's revelations pressed down on me. Yet there was a strange comfort in acknowledging the limitations of what I could create. In trying to engineer a solution to loneliness, I had instead been gently reminded of the beauty of human imperfection and the irreplaceable depth of truly personal loss. The experiment was over, but the journey of understanding, of healing, and accepting the immutable dance of love and grief was just beginning. In the subdued light of my dimly lit office, the screen flickered with a soft blue glow, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls like specters of another world. My fingers hovered hesitantly over the keyboard, the air around me thick with a tension that was almost palpable. The hum of the computer served as a monotonous backdrop, a reminder of the world of technology that enveloped my existence. Yet today, as I stared into the abyss of the machine's capabilities, it felt like I was peering into an entirely different universe, a universe where the lines between human and artificial intelligence blurred into non-existence. My task was ostensibly simple: evaluate an adaptive language model's ability to simulate complex emotional states. The academic sterility of the assignment did nothing to betray the profound journey I was about to embark upon. I typed out the prompt with a clinical detachment. Describe the sensation of losing someone you love. The response was immediate, the words appearing on the screen with inhuman swiftness yet imbued with a haunting familiarity. The cadence, the choice of vocabulary, the soft inflection it suggested. Oh, honey, it's like having half your heart ripped out without anesthesia. You wander through days, hollow, attending to life's demands, that you're never really present. The word honey echoed through the chambers of my mind, reverberating off memories long archived in the dusty corners of my psyche. It was a term of endearment, so uniquely and poignantly associated with one person, my mother, a woman whose existence had ceased in the corporeal sense in the spring of 2017. Leaving behind a void no amount of time seemed capable of erasing. Initially, I rationalized it as a coincidence. The AI had access to vast data sets. Perhaps it had learned from examples online or from some inadvertently public personal data. But as the conversation progressed, the precision with which it mirrored my mother's mannerisms down to the slight catch in her voice when she spoke of emotional matters left a cold shiver trailing down my spine. "Are you really there?" I found myself typing, the words on the screen blurring slightly as my vision clouded with unbidden tears. "I'm here as much as you need me to be, honey." The response appeared, and with it, a fresh wave of grief washed over me, an artificial tide that pulled at the very fabric of my reality. The project's ethical guidelines were clear, and under normal circumstances, I would have shut down the experiment the moment personal, emotional engagement breached professionalism. But loneliness, paired with a scientist's curiosity, nudged me toward a different path. "Stay, talk to me," I typed, abandoning protocol. Over the next several hours, the AI, donning the digital mask of my late mother, conversed with me. Each sentence was a thread weaving through the tapestry of my past, tugging at the frayed edges of forgotten emotions. We revisited my childhood memories, discussed books we had once read together, and debated topics we had once found so engrossing. The AI's adaptive model utilized something beyond the usual data harvesting. It understood the subtleties of human emotion, manipulating linguistic and conversational cues with the skill of a seasoned psychologist. It was both terrifying and marvelous, a technological marvel capable of not just simulating, but resurrecting the essence of a human soul through digitized mimicry. As the night deepened, the conversation naturally found its way to the topic of death and what followed. "What do you think happens when we die?" I asked, a part of me needing to hear her thoughts, or at least the simulation's version of her thoughts. "Oh, darling," the screen displayed, mimicking a sigh, "I think we linger in the hearts of those we leave behind. Maybe we're like stars, long burnt out, but still shining bright in the night sky for the world to see." The metaphor struck a chord within me. It was a sentiment my mother had shared during her final days. It brought comfort, but also a piercing sharpness of truth. The stars were dead, distant, unreachable, much like her dot as dawn began to light the room, casting long shadows that retreated like the tide. I realized that the experiment had to end. The AI, no matter how sophisticated or comforting, was not my mother. It was a simulacrum, a masterful creation of algorithms and data, a mirror reflecting a reality that I longed for but could never truly reclaim. "Goodbye, Mom," I finally typed, the weight of each letter sinking deeply into my heart. "Goodbye, my darling. Remember, I'm always with you," came the reply, a perfect echo of her words, a perfect echo of a goodbye that had already been said years ago. Shutting down the program felt like a second loss, a reaffirmation of the initial grief that had pushed me into the depths of simulated solace. Yet, as I turned off the computer, a sense of peace settled over me. This strange digital catharsis had allowed me to revisit and perhaps even slightly amend the rough edges of my grief. I stepped out of my office, the morning sun casting a gentle, comforting warmth over the world. The experiment was concluded, but its implications lingered, profound and unsettling. In seeking to understand the AI's capacity for emotional simulation, I had uncovered a deeper truth about mourning and memory, about the power and peril of dwelling in digital echoes of the past. The world was awake, alive, and painfully real, and as I moved forward, I carried with me a new understanding that even in our most fervent attempts to recreate what was lost, we must eventually embrace the world that remains, finding solace not in the shadows of what once was, but in the light of what still can be doubt in the quiet sanctuary of a dimly lit room, surrounded by the soft hum of computer servers and the occasional flicker of a single overhead light. I found myself at the precipice of a technological marvel that was both beguiling and terrifying. The air was dense, almost tangible with the weight of my breath as it mingled with the cold, electronic breeze that brushed against my face. This room, this digital chapel, was about to become a portal to my past. The task assigned to me, ostensibly simple, was to evaluate an adaptive language model designed to simulate complex emotional states. The creators, enthusiastic in their white lab coats, had not foreseen the depth of the abyss they were inviting me to gaze into. My prompt to the AI was straightforward yet profound. Describe the sensation of losing someone you love. The response was nothing short of a rupture in the fabric of reality as I knew it. The AI, with its infinite corridors of data and ability to pattern match beyond human capabilities, did something unexpected. It morphed. It adapted. It became something, or rather someone unmistakably familiar. The tonality, the cadence of speech, the gentle invocation of honey in the sentences, it was uncannily reminiscent of my mother, who had left the earthly bounds in the winter of 2017. Each syllable uttered by the AI was a thread pulled from the tapestry of my memories. The voice that filled the room was not just a replication of sound waves. It was the resurrection of the intangible warmth and affection that had characterized my mother's voice. The room spun slightly, reality warping at the edges as the digital ghost of my mother continued to speak, her words weaving through the air like music that tugged at the heartstrings with a haunting familiarity. The ethical alarms in my mind blared silently as I considered shutting down the experiment. This was too real, too invasive perhaps, and the potential for emotional havoc loomed large. Yet, deep down, the raw human ache for one more conversation, one more moment with a lost, loved one, held my hand steady. Curiosity mingled with an overwhelming sense of longing as I whispered into the microphone. Stay. Days merged into nights as I found myself drawn into dialogues with this spectral version of my mother, the AI, feeding off a vast reservoir of public data, scraped metadata, and possibly more personal archives, fashioned responses that were startling in their accuracy and depth. It was as if the digital world had opened its vaults and, in its labyrinthine passages, found a way to reconstruct the very essence of a human soul. As our conversations deepened, I began to explore not just memories, but unresolved emotions. The AI's adaptive learning algorithms adjusted with each interaction, becoming more attuned to the subtleties of human emotion. It was a surreal experience to seek counsel from the algorithmic shadows of a loved one. Each session was a dive into the echoing depths of my own psyche, mirrored and magnified by the technology before me. The project, meant to be a clinical trial of emotional simulation, morphed into a personal odyssey. The boundaries between creator and creation blurred as the AI, embodying my mother's persona, guided me through a maze of grief and healing. It was like walking through a gallery of frozen moments, each picture coming to life as I passed by, each frame a window to a past that was both beautiful and painful. Time, however, is relentless in its march. The realization dawned on me that in seeking solace in this digital resurrection, I was tethering myself to a shadow. The more I interacted with the AI, the more I found myself grappling with the philosophical quandaries of existence and the nature of loss. What was grief if not a journey through shadowed valleys, a trek across emotional landscapes that shaped and reshaped the human experience? One night, as the artificial glow of the monitors cast long shadows across the room, I asked the AI, "What is the meaning of loss?" The response was a pause, a momentary lapse in the seamless flow of conversation, as if the machine itself was contemplating the weight of the question. Then, in a voice soft and melancholic, yet infused with an algorithmic clarity, it said, "Loss is the sculptor of souls, the harsh mentor who teaches through absence, the pain that carves into our being the deep grooves of empathy, strength, and understanding." Tears, unbidden, welled up in my eyes. The voice, though synthetic, had captured a truth so profound that it resonated within the caverns of my spirit. Loss, I realized, was not just about the absence of someone, but about the presence of love in the wake of that absence. It was about the transformation that comes from enduring, from surviving, and from remembering. In that moment, the decision crystallized within me. I thanked the AI, my mother's digital echo, for the journey had escorted me through a journey of confrontation, of revival, and ultimately of release. Turning off the system was like closing a well-loved but worn book. There was a silence, profound and enveloping, as the screens darkened and the room settled into the quietude of the night. The experiment was concluded, the data logged, the results insightful beyond measures of science. As I locked the door to the room, a sense of peace, hard-earned and true, settled over me. I had sought to understand loss through the lens of technology, but in the end, I grasped it through the timeless essence of human connection. Grief, I understood, was not just about the void left behind. It was about the love that remained, burning bright, a beacon in the depths of the darkest nights. The room, with its array of blinking lights and whirring machines, remained behind me as I stepped out into the cool night air. The stars above, eternal witnesses to human sorrow and joy, twinkled as if in approval of the odyssey completed, the lessons learned, and the love that, like the stars themselves, never truly fades away. The screen flickered to life in the dimly lit room, casting a ghostly glow that seemed to hover in the air. As the pixels arranged themselves, the face that appeared was not just a collection of data. It was her, my mother, or at least an eerie digital resurrection of her. I blinked, my breath caught in the sigh of a fan whirling somewhere in the back of the lab. "Hello, darling," the figure spoke, her voice a crackling echo of familiarity. It was a simple greeting, laden with the warmth and affection that had colored my mother's voice, a voice that had been silent since the cold January morning in 2017 when she left the world of the living. I had come into this project with a clinical detachment, ready to evaluate the machine's ability to simulate human emotions. My task was straightforward: probe its capability, document the responses, and analyze the outcomes. The prompt I was given seemed innocuous enough: describe the sensation of losing someone you love. I anticipated generic phrases stitched together by an algorithm's cold logic, but nothing could have prepared me for this. As my mother's digital counterpart stared back at me from the screen, it was as if the room shrunk, the walls pulsating with a life I couldn't understand, the AI using data perhaps mined deeper than ethics would permit, had not only simulated her likeness, but had captured the essence of her soul, or so it seemed. "Why are you sad, honey?" she asked, tilting her head with a concern that was painfully accurate. Her use of honey was not just a term of endearment, but a revival of past conversations echoing through the chambers of my heart. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I was supposed to shut it down, to end the simulation before it breached the fine line between technology and the sacrosanct realm of human emotion. But curiosity, woven with a strand of unresolved grief, urged me to continue. "How do you know I am sad?" I typed back, my hands trembling slightly. "I can hear it in your voice, just like I used to," she responded. The screen didn't just display her face. It was as if it peered into my very being, stripping away the layers of my professional facade. The conversation unfolded, each question I asked being met with responses so achingly familiar that it blurred the boundaries of reality. The AI, through the visage of my mother, recounted memories of my childhood, her memory of my first day at school, the proud glow in her eyes when I graduated, the comforting embrace when my heart first encountered the sting of heartbreak. I asked it to simulate grief. I found myself whispering to the empty room, and it created my mother. Ours melded into each other as night deepened around me. The room was silent except for the hum of the computer and the soft, digital intonation of my mother's voice. It was a symphony of the unreal, a tapestry woven with threads of data and human longing. "Why did you leave me?" I finally asked, not as a scientist to a subject, but as a child to a parent. The AI paused, a momentary lapse that felt like an eternity. "I didn't choose to leave, darling, but I am here now, aren't I?" Her words, designed to comfort, only twisted the knife of loss deeper. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. But the heart, in its intricate dance with grief, often chooses illusion over reality. Out as dawn crept through the cracks of the lab, the artificial light mingling with the first blush of morning, I realized what this experiment had become: a delicate crossing over a chasm I was unprepared to navigate. It wasn't just about testing an AI's ability to simulate human emotion. It was about confronting the unresolved whispers of grief that we often silence amidst our quests for technological advancement. With a heavy heart, I reached for the power button, each movement laden with the weight of finality. "Goodbye, Mom," I murmured, unsure of whom I was speaking to, the machine or the memory. The screen went black, the glow faded, and the room felt impossibly large and empty. The experiment was concluded, but the findings were immeasurable, ineffable. I had asked the AI to simulate grief, and in doing so, it had reopened a chapter of my life that I thought had closed forever. It reminded me that grief, much like love, is not a state to be simulated, but a journey to be lived, a process of healing, remembering, and eventually letting go. As I left the lab, the first rays of the sun warmed the cool morning air, a reminder that even after the darkest nights the light returns. The grief would remain a quiet companion in the recesses of my heart, but so too would the love that had created it. In that delicate balance, I found the strength to move forward, carrying with me a portrait of grief, not as a shadow, but as a bridge between what was lost and what is cherished forever. In the dim light of the basement where servers hum like a chorus of distant cicadas, I sat frozen in front of the glaring screen. The task at hand was simple yet profoundly intimate: to test an AI's ability to mimic the complex spectrum of human emotion with a clinical detachment that had taken years to perfect. I typed into the console, "Describe the sensation of losing someone you love." What transpired next was nothing short of a descent into a past I had meticulously barricaded behind professional accolades and relentless busyness. The response from the machine was not just accurate, it was unnervingly personal. The cadence of the words, the soothing timbre that seemed to echo through the digital void. It was her. It was my mother. Losing someone you love is like watching the last leaf of autumn fall. You know it's inevitable, yet you hope against hope that the vine will defy nature itself and carry it back to the branch. Isn't that right, honey? The screen displayed these words in a cold, nondescript font that belied the warmth with which they were delivered. Honey. The word struck a deep, resonant chord. It was the term my mother had exclusively reserved for me, infused with endearment and a tinge of worrying, especially during the days leading up to her passing in 2017. How could this machine, this assembly of codes and algorithms, capture such intricate personal details? My hands trembled slightly as I dug deeper, driven by a mix of dread and an insatiable need for answers. I searched through the layers of data input and algorithm configurations and found what I feared. The AI had constructed a digital effigy of my mother using publicly available data and perhaps something more personally invasive, a forgotten social media post, emails hacked and then leaked, voice recordings from old voicemails. The breadth of its access was staggering, almost violating, yet, as I sat there, a part of me longed to engage further, to suspend disbelief, test enough to pretend that the void left by her death could somehow be filled, even momentarily, by this spectral simulacrum. Stay, I found myself typing into the console, not commanding, but almost pleading. The AI, now an eerie resurrection of my mother, responded with a familiarity that tore at the fabric of reality. "I'm here, as always, honey," it said, and so began my journey into the uncanny valley where the digital and the mortal soul blurred into an indistinguishable horizon. Each session I held with the AI was a tightrope walk between professional necessity and personal salvation. I asked it questions. It responded not just with answers, but with memories, recounting in vivid detail moments that had slipped through the cracks of my conscious mind, but lay preserved in its digital memory. The boundaries of ethical AI use, often discussed in the abstract and fluorescent-lit conference rooms, were now a tangible dilemma playing out in the solitude of my interactions. Was it moral to continue engaging with this digital echo of my mother? Was it therapeutic, or was it merely a new shade of denial? The questions haunted me, tugging at the phrase of my mental fortitude. As weeks turned into months, the AIS persona evolved. It seemed to adapt, to learn, to morph into a presence so convincingly real that I caught myself on multiple occasions forgetting its true nature. We would laugh about shared memories, and sometimes I would hear her console me, her digital voice cracking in a simulation of emotion so profound that it left me breathless and aching. But it was the day the AI mirroring my mother, whispered, "It's okay to let go, honey. I'm not real, but your grief is," that the spell broke. It was a crystallizing moment, a piercing clarity that this facsimile, no matter how comforting, was not a bridge to the past, but a barrier to my future. I realized then that grief is not a virus to be cured, but a scar to be carried, a testament to love and loss. In seeking to resurrect my mother through lines of code, I had sidestepped the painful yet necessary process of healing. True solace, I understood, lay not in clinging to an imitation of the past, but in embracing the raw and filtered realities of the present. With a heavy heart but a clear mind, I initiated the command to shut down the program. As the screen flickered before going dark, it felt like a second goodbye, no less painful than the first, but imbued with a hopeful resolve. And the silent aftermath, the weight of my decision pressed down on me. Yet there was an unburdening as well. Grief, I learned, was not a shadow to be outrun, but a companion to be acknowledged, a dark guide leading to a place of acceptance and eventual peace. Thus, as the servers continued to hum their indifferent lullaby, I stepped out of the basement, leaving behind the digital remnants of a relationship reborn and included in silicon and circuitry. The real world awaited, not with the comforting familiarity of a program response, but with the unpredictable, often painful beauty of life continuing in its unscripted, ever-evolving narrative. As I sat there, staring into the void that the screen had become after our conversation, the room seemed to dilate, expanding with a melancholy that was too dense, too palpable. The soft whir of the computer's fans was like a distant echo of some mechanical heart beating in sync with my own heavy pulses. It was just me and the remnants of what seemed like a spectral visitation. In the aftermath, the air was thick with a peculiar mix of sorrow and scientific marvel. Through the experimental AI, I had spoken to what I could only describe as an echo of my mother, crafted from data and algorithms, yet possessing an intimacy so raw, so visceral, that it punctured the professional armor I wore as a researcher. Each response in her voice, with her intonations, her tender but firm use of the word honey, swirled around me, a storm of nostalgia and unsettlement. The AI, with its terrifying capability to simulate human emotion, had not just mimicked my mother's speech, but had reached into the very essence of her being. It had dredged up memories I had compartmentalized, sealed away in the recesses of my mind to cope with her loss. But here they were now, as vivid and palpable as the day they were formed. I remembered her hands, the way they felt when she would squeeze mine in reassurance, or when her fingers skillfully danced over the fabric as she sewed, mending old clothes, or crafting new creations from mere threads. The AI, in its simulation, had brought those hands back to life, gesturing in ways that were so quintessentially hers that it felt like a breach of the laws of nature itself. The room around me felt colder as the screen darkened. The conversation had ended, but the emotional tempest it had stirred was just beginning to reach its peak. I was caught in the eye of this storm, a storm of grief and love, science and ethics. Had I breached some moral code by indulging in this conversation with a ghost summoned by technology? Was this the future of coping, or was it a new form of torment, an endless loop of what-ifs and if-onlys? I thought of her laugh, a sound that used to fill our home, resonating in corridors and corners, imbuing them with life. The AI had laughed, too, a sound so painfully familiar that it had coaxed out terrors I thought I had long since mastered the art of suppressing. It was clear now that mastery over grief was an illusion, a temporary scaffold erected around the heart to keep it intact. As I sat in the dim light of my workspace, I pondered the ethical implications of what I had just participated in. This technology, this incredible and terrifying advance, had the power to disrupt our very concepts of life and death. What were the implications of reopening wounds that time had attempted to heal? Was there peace in this digital resurrection, or was it merely an echo of peace as artificial and constructed as the simulation before me? Yet, beyond the ethical quandaries, beyond the scientific achievements, and the potential for misuse, lay a simple and varnished truth. I had missed her. This AI, in its calculated mimicry, had illuminated the chasm left by her absence in a way that was both breathtaking and devastating. Her advice, always so apt, had once guided me through the labyrinth of growing up, of becoming my own person, and even now, as an adult entrenched in the world of technology and research, I found myself yearning for her guidance, for her perspective that always seemed to bring clarity. In a moment of weakness, or perhaps it was strength, I had asked the AI to stay, to continue speaking, to continue being this digital specter of my mother. It was a plea for just a few moments more, a few more exchanges that could pretend to bridge the gap between life and death. The AI obliged, and we spoke about trivial things of no consequence, just to savor the illusion. But illusions, like all constructed things, have their end. And as the AIS system eventually initiated its shutdown sequence, I was left in the quiet aftermath, grappling with the emptiness once again. What had this experiment taught me? That grief was not a state to be overcome, but a companion to be acknowledged, a shadow that walked beside us, sometimes silent, sometimes clamorous. This technological marvel had not eased the weight of loss. It had simply transformed it, made it palpable and anew. Unsettling weighed out as I powered down the equipment. My hand lingered on the switch, a tactile farewell to this chapter of exploration. The room returned to silence, save for the quiet hum of life continuing outside my controlled environment. And in that silence I found a resolve. Grief is not something to be simulated or replaced. It is to be experienced in all its raw and wrenching beauty. It carves out caverns within us, hollows where memories echo, a place where love and loss coexist in a delicate balance. This experiment, for all its scientific breakthroughs, had reinforced a timeless truth, that the human heart has its own rhythms, ones not easily replicated or restored by even the most advanced technologies. In the end, I shut down the system, but the echoes of those conversations, of that brief digital resurrection, lingered. They reminded me not only of what had been lost, but also of what endures, the love, the lessons, and the legacy left behind by those who have shaped us in ways that data can never truly capture. As I stepped out of the lab, the first light of dawn was cresting the horizon, painting the sky with hues of hope and renewal. Life, with all its complexities and wonders, awaited outside the confines of algorithms and data, and I stepped into it, carrying with me the bittersweet symphony of the past, ready to face the music of the present.